Are you ready for a gnarly question and answer as far as a requirement goes? Well, check this out. We're going to break down today what does it look like to introduce a new type of sorting into a category. In fact, that's really more than we can fit into this knowledge bite format as far as a question and answer goes. We're going to break this down over the coming weeks, but take it bite-sized so that we really learn and understand how this is supposed to be architected on the Adobe Commerce Platform. I am Joseph Maxwell, president of SwiftOtter, and it is my absolute pleasure to bring this information to all of you Magento lovers out there. Let's take a look at this question. A merchant utilizing Adobe Commerce would like to introduce capacity sorting into category and search pages. Unfortunately, none of the capacities are standardized. I tell you what, just a quick timeout here. This is probably nothing. This is a very common problem that you're going to face almost all the time. There's going to be some data points that are just not standardized at all. And ultimately, like I talked to our team about here last week, as far as how we interface with our clients, our Adobe Commerce and BigCommerce customers, are we going to say, have an idea of no, this is not possible, or yes, we can do it, let's just figure out the way to do this? And ultimately, this question was submitted by a wonderful member of the community. She asked this question of me, and I thought, let's just turn this into a knowledge bite where everybody can benefit from this answer as far as a yes can do attitude. And I really appreciated seeing this from her, and I really hope that this also provides value to the rest of the community as well. So continuing on, none of these capacities are standardized and represent different units of measure. Oh, isn't that normal? For example, one product may have a 100 milliliter capacity and another 2 cups. You decide that the first step is to unify these values into a common system. Where do you store each product's unified calculation value? Now, as always, with these knowledge bite questions, I come up with 3 different options. It's an exercise, a mental exercise for me as far as what else could work, but it's also a mental exercise as far as why wouldn't they work, or what would be the best option. In fact, in some of these cases, all 3 of them might be a correct answer. And then it's a matter of choosing the best answer. So whether you're studying for a certification, whether you are just seeking to hone your knowledge or solve a problem, perhaps if you come across this video, doing a search, either way, this is about thinking outside the box and presenting and identifying the best solution. So here are the 3 options that I came up with. Number 1, utilize an extension attribute attached to the product interface object. Option B, create a product attribute to save and store the value. Or option C, create an adapter to calculate and expose the attribute to the live search feed. Okay. We have several options here, and this is where it's good to start thinking this through. The best solution, in my opinion, is almost always the solution that has to do with the least amount of code. So if we look at each one of these different options, the first question I would ask you is which has the least code, which is already mostly baked into the system. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, the answer B would be correct. We need to create a product attribute and to save and store the value. That would be the least amount of code. So now, starting with that as our foundation, we need to go forward and see, does this actually resolve the problem overall? Because this is not all of the answer, right? I mean, just having the attribute to store the value is not the entire answer. So let's dive into this, and we'll walk through each one of these individually. Let's start with A. Utilizing an extension attribute attached to the product interface object. So basically, we are storing a calculated container value here, or capacity value. This extension attribute would then have to be initialized. First, we have to define an extension attributes.xml. It has to be then attached to the product interface via some plugins, but it has to load its data from somewhere. And I think this is a big sticking point. So are we going to then do calculations on the fly, or are we going to pre-calculate them? Using the idea of the product interface, we have either as an option. However, I would tend to say that that on-the-fly calculation is probably not good for performance. We have an operation that can easily be done one time, and yet it would be done many, many times. So I would say on-the-fly calculation is probably not a good option from a performance standpoint. So thus, we would be left with loading that data from somewhere, which means we have another query that we have to run if it's pre-calculated, which means we have to create a whole new table, indexes, etc. So in this way, I'm kind of thinking that product interface is not necessarily the best idea. So, but that is on the data storage side. What about the actual sort side? Now, you have to remember that in order for it to be sorted, it has to actually be sorted at the Elasticsearch level. If it's sorted at the Elasticsearch level, we have to push this information up there, which means that we have to create more plugins to push this data up into Elasticsearch. We have to create even more plugins to allow this sort order to be listed in the sort order fields. I think you're getting where I'm going here. So as we think this through, this is probably not a great option. Now, if that's what's necessary to do this, well, then yeah, we understand that it is what it is. But for right now, I would like to axe A off of our list. So let's look at B. Create a product attribute to save and to store the value. Okay, what do we think about this one? The product attribute, it seems kind of attractive. We already identified which one seems off the cuff to have the least amount of code. Product attribute, there's no plugins necessary to initial. Well, I mean, all we have to do is create a data patch. We have the product attribute set. We can create a UI component fairly easily to actually hide this attribute from the product edit page. Actually making it read-only could be a little more tricky if we want to enforce that at the API level. But there's even options for doing that. We could even create like a plugin for catalog product save before, I believe, and then use that as the opportunity to override that or prevent it from being overridden or calculate at that point. Something along those lines might make sense. Ultimately, if we do hook into, for example, this catalog product save before event, all we have to do then is recalculate the value and allow it to proceed through the saving process. And it's now in an attribute. Well, guess what? With an attribute, we can mark it as used for sorting in product listing. So right there, outside of the whole calculation process, right there, all of the requirements are met here with using this product attribute. That sounds like a winning solution to me. But we can look at option number 3, create an adapter to calculate and expose. Is this even really necessary considering that we can do this through the actual product attribute itself? This C is kind of a variation of A. Ultimately, yeah, it would be, well, it's not correct. I mean, it would, yes, it would be possible. You can hack Elasticsearch to send over new values as well. But at the end of the day, B is vastly the most efficient option by far. Uses native functionality, and so it ultimately checks all the boxes for being a good option or a good solution. Might there be some things that we haven't considered? Yeah, but I think overall we've really nailed down the vast majority of this use case. And so with that, we're going to continue this series here in our upcoming Knowledge Bite videos so that you can truly become an expert on such a subject.